It's that time of year where the world's greatest investors share what they have been up to. You can see the latest financials for Michael Burry, Stanley Druckenmiller, David Tepper, even the secret reveal from Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway portfolio. We're going to cover it all in this video. If this is your first time tuning in, you're watching Unrivaled Investing. Let's dive right in to understand what are the stocks that the most successful investors, the super investors, have been buying and selling. Looking at Michael Burry's holdings, you can see he's actually made a sizable bet in Chinese stocks, JD and Alibaba, increasing their stakes significantly, also making bets on a variety of different things. I'd say his largest individual new buy is related to gold. Perhaps this has to deal with the uncertainty of the U.S. running, obscene fiscal deficits, having a large debt outstanding, and then this concern of, well, when are you actually going to address it? And maybe it just gets monetized over time. And so you've seen gold, going significantly higher. So now it's interesting to see Michael Burry has become a gold bug. He's also making some energy plays, BP and Vital Energy. So, a commodity call. You've seen Warren Buffett do a similar thing. So gold, commodities, Chinese stocks, Citigroup as being cheap. I've actually called out Citigroup before as being cheap. Block, I think he got it at much lower prices. So this is broadly his portfolio. You also see a stake in Baidu as well. So these are, a lot of different positions, a lot of ads, a couple of new buys from Michael Burry. I think it is worth understanding, though, that these are, he oftentimes does trade positions, and he's not alone with finding value in Chinese stocks, which does suggest maybe you have seen the bottom with a lot of these companies. Like Alibaba is also one of the top holdings. It looks like the top holding for David Tepper. He's a very large, successful hedge fund manager at Appaloosa, multi-decade track record, just absolutely crushing the market. Looking at his individual transactions, it's not only Baba, but he's also in the same camp as Michael Burry with buying a stake in Baidu, also PDD. So looking at Chinese e-commerce through PDD and Baba, as well as Baidu, making a bet on these Chinese stocks. If you look at these top holdings outside of Oracle, it's really China that he was making a bet would, increase in value, because everything else he was trimming. It's not surprising, in all honesty, to see investors increasingly leaning towards China. I mean, eventually, you could see this, the share price for Baba. It was absolutely crushed, and in fairness, like I previously thought there was a lot more value, but at some point, you do say, hey, a bottom does happen, and eventually the amount of buybacks that they're doing, and I'll probably do a whole separate video on Baba if it would be helpful for the unrivaled nation. But not only are you finding the super investors interested in Baba, but I'd argue AI is also making the case, and you can see for yourself at AI Ticker Chat, where we're rolling out the latest AI models using cutting edge tools to help individual investors. You can check out the link below. First model is completely free just to try out these new AI models. And so you can see how AI Ticker Chat is suggesting that there could be several 100% upside for Alibaba based on, how they execute in the years ahead. So not only does Michael Burry, David Tepper, and AI Ticker Chat see a lot of upside for the Chinese stock, saying maybe they have bottomed out and now it's, the beginning of a monster rally for them. But I think it is worth pausing and reflecting here that Michael Burry, it's still, he has a net worth presumably around $1 billion, maybe even more. This portfolio is only $100 million. So that does suggest that he is sitting on a sizable cash position. If you keep your cash at Interactive Brokers, you're getting your 4.8% plus. So see the link below for Interactive Brokers. That's what I personally use. And so I think, the signal from Michael Burry isn't necessarily that this is the all-in moment. This is a moment where he's finding things to do. And, I think he just enjoys playing the game and likes finding cheap things and making bets. I don't think this is the all-in bet for Michael Burry. I think you will see that this cycle, but I don't think you've seen it yet. So that is worth understanding. Stanley Druckenmiller. Now, for context, he is, he's in a different league, to be honest. 30% for 30 years without a single down year. I mean, there are no investors, I'd argue, that have that type of consistency. And Stanley Druckenmiller, of his most recent amazing calls, he absolutely nailed NVIDIA, where he saw what was going on with AI, he bought it, and he significantly cut his stake. So for all the Nvidia bulls out there, it is worth understanding. I mean, this was a guy that was buying back when it was below $200 a share. At the quarter end, it was $900 a share. So in about a year, because he first owned it in the fourth quarter of 2022. So it's not like he's a long-term investor or anything like that. He's a trader. He saw the opportunity, made, 4 or 5x in a very short period. Now he's saying, maybe this is a bit overrun, gone a little too far too fast. Let's cut the exposure by, looks like 60-70% from 9% of his portfolio to around 3%. That said, he did put on a sizable call option, IWM, so that's the Russell 2000. So maybe he's making a bet that these smaller stocks could start to have some sort of rebound. It is worth understanding the mix for IWM is quite a bit different than, let's say, the S&P 500. And so maybe that's a call, because I think when you're talking about IWM, you're talking about some of which are more speculative companies, that's for sure. You also might have, I think, more of the small banks in that. So there is that dynamic as well, as if those banks do well, IWM might do well. But really, it's a bet on the smaller companies, I'd argue the more speculative companies getting a bet. And not only is it a outright bet on IWM, it's also a call option. So it shows you how aggressive, he can be with, the market value. So that's the nominal value, I think, of that call option is around $600 million. So I don't think the actual cash that he put up represents 15% of his portfolio. Otherwise, he has, sizable holdings in the tech comfortable companies like Microsoft. He also has tech, but he's been trimming that. He's talked about copper being a play as something interesting. So always interesting to see what some of the greatest traders are doing. We've talked about Michael Burry. We've talked about Stanley Druckenmiller, both of them finding value in Chinese stocks. I think if you are going to consider something like the Chinese stocks, maybe I will make a separate video on either BABA or JD. Burry was buying JD as well as BABA. I do think you do have to, if you have to be willing to stomach I'd argue the additional risks with dealing with the CCP. And I would personally say that game has changed over time, and the amount of influence that they're willing to play in the market has become much more noticeable over the last 5 years. So that is something. So it's effectively a buyer beware if that's going to be the path. And, maybe they, if this first hint that there could be problems, maybe they'd get out of it. So let's go into what is Warren Buffett's secret bet. I've seen a lot of speculation on what it could be over the last few months. For most part, most people have missed it. Before that, though, first of all, in full disclosure, this is not financial advice. Also, earlier today, this was just a couple hours ago, a premium member of the Unrivaled Investing community commented, "Thanks for running such a great service. How do you recommend someone who is a novice without skills in financial evaluations of companies and is looking to start to build their portfolio to go about it? Almost all of your stock recommendations have done phenomenally over the last 2 years." And so this is just one of the types of conversations we're having in our exclusive community at Unrivaled Investing. Now, for record, not all my picks go straight to the moon. I definitely do make mistakes, so I do appreciate the nice compliment, Pratish, but not everything is going to be phenomenal. I unfortunately, I too am human. That said, some things have worked out well, and so I'm glad to glad to be able to share my own personal journey with subscribers, and I'm glad that a lot of folks find it valuable. You can check it out yourself today at Unrivaled Investing. I also have educational courses where if you want to learn about how to value stocks or how to read financial statements, that's also available at unrivaledinvesting.com. This is just one of the types of questions that we're talking and answering at Unrivaled Investing. I'll be answering that either later tonight or tomorrow. And so what is Warren Buffett's secret bet? So you see there's this amended 13F HR, and they're saying, look, we did have this confidential treatment through May 31st, but we're going to report it now. So therefore the confidential treatment is no longer warranted. It's actually Chubb Limited, CB is the ticker. It's around a $5-6 billion value, around 20 million shares. Why is he buying insurance? Well, one very shrewd, sharp investor in Viking Vancouver calls this out. Buffett's new favorite sector is property and casualty insurance. What a shocker. I'm shocked. Float matters again. Makes sense he would go with Chubb between size, liquidity, quality, company. Not that past performance matters, but sometimes it can be helpful to look at the facts just for fun. What's he talking about here? And then what is he talking about comparing the facts? So what he's talking about, this very shrewd investor, he is talking about how Warren Buffett A couple of years ago, he bought Allegheny. He has a history in property and casualty insurance. What is float? Float is the premiums you collect from your customers in insurance, and the cash that you sort of hold because your customers, paid you this premium, and the time between which you receive that premium and your customers have some sort of claim where you have to pay it out. So that cash that you hold is called float. In a low interest rate environment, that float is not worth very much. But in a higher interest rate environment, that float can be worth a lot. And that is what some insurance companies, and I've called this out repeatedly. For example, one of my largest holdings is Fairfax. I've done a couple videos on that. For the record, I keep most of that content, though, for my subscribers at Unrivaled Investing. It's a night and day difference. And Buffett is aware of this because his investment income from his float is going a lot higher. Because previously, low yield on cash, that float doesn't get a lot. Yield on cash goes up. Now you're starting at a lot. And by the way, you start talking about leverage in the business, looking at the float relative to the equity in the business. Now you're talking about potentially very compelling returns on equity, maybe somewhere between 10 and 20% annual return on equity, just based on prudent underwriting. So you got to make sure you're not writing, bad insurance contracts where you're losing business, and you have conservative investing. Those two combined, chef's kiss, you can get great results. And so I think Buffett is saying, okay, what are some of the reasonable insurance companies where maybe he might take a stab at it and think maybe even Berkshire would consider buying it. Now, they're not buying, let's say 20% of Chubb. I think this is only a 5-6% stake in the insurance company. But, the context that Viking Vancouver is making is that, for Berkshire, there are limitations where they do have to consider the size, liquidity of the investment, the quality of the company. And so Chubb made sense for them. That said, there might be other better bets, as he's suggesting with Fairfax, which he owns. Fairfax I also own as well, which Fairfax, you can see over the last 5 years, they've compounded book value at 17% versus Chubb only growing 6%. But if you, look at it on a price to book multiple, it still looks very favorable for Fairfax relative to its competitors. Also has a better dividend yield with Fairfax. And so, it's interesting to see what's going on here. It is also important to have context in terms of the Berkshire portfolio. So this is now what looks like, easily a top 10 position for Berkshire, this position around $6-7 billion in Chubb. It's not, a game changer for them. And it does come at a time when, he's been trimming Apple and continuing to buy Oxy. And that fits with the commodities bet that you saw with Michael Burry, where not only is he buying gold, but he's also buying energy stocks. So you're seeing that arguably with Warren Buffett as well. So that is an overview of what some of the super investors have been up to, looking at Michael Burry finding value in China, but I'd argue still having a large cash balance. It would be ready to pounce if he, let's say if there was, real problems. Maybe there's also an international portfolio that we're not seeing. That's possible. You also see he's in the same camp with we have David Tepper. David Tepper's also been making a bet on Chinese stocks. In a completely different camp, you have Stanley Druckenmiller, another super investor. He's not playing China. He's saying that's too hard. I don't like, what's going on with the government there. But he is an amazing trader. He's saying, what's gone on with AI probably gone on a little too far, pulling back a bit, taking some chips off the table with NVIDIA, making a sizable bet in terms of some sort of speculative rally with small cap stocks. And then you see Warren Buffett saying, hey, let's focus on the fundamentals, focus on the fact that interest rates probably aren't going back to zero. And that, it's great to find businesses where you can dramatically benefit from this higher rate environment, such as some of these property and casualty insurance companies like Chubb. My personal bet has been on Fairfax. If this video has been helpful for you, I appreciate that thumbs up, that subscribe button. Thanks so much for tuning into Unrivaled Investing. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them below. I'll be checking that out later. Thanks so much.